Hi, this is Pat Iyer with Writing to Get Business, and I have with me today Sjofers, who is an expert in an unusual area of sampling and doing research with marketplaces. I've asked him to come on the show today to talk about his writing process that he goes through in preparing the content that he disseminates. Welcome to the show, Per.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Pat, and thank you for having me. Hopefully I can share some insights in how I go about doing writing and telling stories and so forth.
Well, first of all, can you tell our listener about the area of your business so that we have some context when we hear more about your writing process?
Okay, thank you. Well, what we do in my company is give advice on how to price products or services, and this advice comes from price-specific market research, and we have a process that I developed, and the process stems from my frustration in running companies that I've done. I run a couple of companies in Europe and a couple of companies here in the States once I moved here. And in those companies, we did experiments with pricing. Some of those experiments were hugely successful, like next quarter revenues are up 25%. And some of those experiments were complete duds. And what I had learned in business school and could read about pricing was so academic that it was really useless. We couldn't use that information to figure out why some of those experiments worked and others did not. So eventually I decided to set up a process that would make every pricing experiment a success. And that's the process we're using. And in short, it's about measuring willingness to pay and then correlate that willingness to pay with all different attributes about the buyer and the seller and the product or the service.
That's a very data-driven approach compared to saying, well, I think we'll make our product $9.97 and see how it flies.
Yes, you may say so. I obviously I'm in love with my business as one should be, but it's let me tell you a story about that. Okay, I spoke to this CEO of a SaaS company, and he said our price is $160 per month for our service. And it's a price that really feels good. But I don't really know. Maybe we should have been $99. Maybe we should have been $500. I don't know. But $160 feels the right price. That is not the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That is not. I mean, because he is guaranteed leaving enormous amount of money on the table. He can most likely double his revenue by pricing right. So that's a mistake, a common mistake.
Yes, that's more the intuition, like checking the crystal ball and saying, 160, feels good, light shining, think we'll do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned crystal ball, because I had another client. He said he didn't want to engage us, and the way he said that is that he said, my crystal ball is better than your science.
Oh, now that's an interesting assertion.
Yes.
I bet the hair on your neck went right up. And
absolutely, yeah. It was, and he had a really interesting, very innovative product. So he again, he left money on the table, guaranteed. Yeah. So
obviously, you've been spending a fair amount of time helping people in the marketplace understanding what you have to offer, the services that you provide, the benefits, the values. How have you used your writing skills to help craft those marketing messages? Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, first of all, I think it's in as you already heard, I want to deliver my message as stories. I think, ever since the pre-Stone Age, stories is how you delivered information from one generation to the next generation. So we are so hardwired to understand and appreciate stories as opposed to information, dry information. And So all my writing, my book is all about stories. All the articles, and I write quite a few articles and publish them, and blog posts and so forth. They're all about stories, because stories is what people want to hear. It's sort of funny. I think one experience I have is you talk to somebody on the phone or on the Zoom call or whatever, and you see that that somebody needs to go. It's sort of end of a meeting, and then you ask, "Do you have time for a story?" And they always say yes.
Mm.
So I think that's because we love stories. We are hardwired to love stories. So and the same when obviously I'm supporting the salespeople we have, but I'm out selling as well. And in the same way, I'm trying to use stories as much as I can to deliver the message of why people should engage me, or my company, I should say.
When you are using stories, do you think in terms of disguising the details or not revealing company names, or are these all situations where it's okay to share that kind of information?
It kind of it depends on what the story is and who the receiver is. Sometimes it's appropriate to mention the company name. Other times it's not, and then it's a judgment call. And obviously the story always gets stronger if you can do it, but you can't always do it. So especially when you have maybe people in a competing situation, you don't want to disclose anything about first of all, you don't want to disclose anything that is confidential, but at the same time, you don't want to disclose anything to a competitor, even if it's not confidential.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the book that you're writing. Tell us more about how you chose that topic and what process you're going through to write that book.
Well, the book is, I've been focusing on pricing for the last 14 years or so. And the book is a complete brain dump of everything I know. It is, there are a few books about pricing. There may be a dozen books, and they all come from academia. I don't come from academia. I read a lot, as you can see from my background here, but I don't take an academic approach to pricing, and that's a huge difference. I was actually interviewed by Yale Business Press here a couple of months ago, because they wanted to hear about an expert in pricing, and a couple of days ago they sent me the draft of the article. There's a long article, maybe 25 pages or so, and it was all academical. It was written in such a way that pricing is so crucial and so fundamental to every business, and yet the information that was shared in that draft article was the same theoretical information that I found when I took my MBA,
Mm-hmm.
and so I had another call with the guy and say, you have to put in the practical pieces, because that's what's going to make a difference for entrepreneurs who's going to read this, for business leaders, for CEOs, for CMOs. So the book about pricing is built on stories. Everything is built on stories. Everything is built on how you can practically use pricing in a company to drive higher sales and higher revenues and higher profits. There is some academic background, but what I do is that I translate that into what does it mean in practice for a business. You have to be practical.
It sounds like you're writing this book for your ideal client who would be in a position to hire you as a consulting company. If that's true, and it sounds like it is from the way that your body gestures went, of course, Pat. Yeah, I got that. Many authors struggle with how much they should put in a book because they are fearful that if they give away too much information, the buyer is not going to hire them. Did that dilemma pose itself to you as you're writing this
No,
book?
no, I think it's, I think, yes, that may happen sometimes, but I think the majority of potential readers would say, um, wow, this is a real expert, and this is somebody who's been in the trenches, who understands how to do this in real companies, in real circumstances, and it's what he said. There's a saying, something like, if you think it's expensive to do it yourself, or something like that. No, if you think it's expensive to hire an expert, think about how expensive it is to hire an amateur, you know.
Reminds
So,
me of the time I dropped a ring in the sink and my husband took apart the little S-shaped pipe under the sink and couldn't put it back together. And we ended up hiring a plumber to come and fix the problem that was created by me to begin with and exacerbated by my husband.
well, you're not the only one having exactly the same experience, and not only sinks. When it comes to practical hardware, things like that, I'm completely useless. So I've learned the lesson several times, and I always use experts because I know it's going to always be more expensive if I get involved.
Mm-hmm.
So that's terrible. So, but but sort of going back to your question, I think it's a fear that a lot of writers have, and I think it's an unfounded fear. I think you have to really come across as your craft, whatever the craft is, and you do this by demonstrating over and over again the insights that you can deliver to the reader. So.
Mm-hmm. And
And
also you're discussing the benefits of the methodology and the way the methodology works, but they can't replicate your methodology because of the software systems that are
yeah,
involved in what you offer.
that's true. Well, anything can be reverse engineered if you put a lot of resource on it.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously it's a lot more cost effective to just hire us in that case, instead of replicating it, or trying to replicate it. So, and that goes for almost all companies. Uh, but another story, there's something out there called pricing software. This is something that is used by companies that have lots of SKUs, many different channels maybe, and it sort of keep track. If we have 100,000 SKUs, your Excel spreadsheet is not going to work. So pricing software is helping companies to manage their prices and so forth. And I was approached about 6 months ago by this company local here to Los Angeles, who developed pricing software by themselves for their own use. They sell car parts, and the CEO decided that we need software. And so they spent $9 million developing this software. And it's really good. But they could have had commercial software for a couple of 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
So, so what's the point, And that, buy it or make it. You're often much better off by buying it as opposed to trying to make it yourself.
Let's go back to your book. you came up with the idea, you know your target market. How did you assemble your concepts to know what you wanted to write about and in what order?
Okay, so what I always do when I write stuff, and or I should say lengthy stuff, is that I start with the table of context, and so I know how to structure the book. I know what I should talk about and in which order. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And once I know that, I fill in the white spaces between the chapter titles and subchapter titles. That's how I always have done it, and that's how I do it this time again. Then of course, when you read the whole thing and you say, okay, maybe this chapter needs to go here instead of here, and stuff like that. But it creates a framework that, at least for me, makes it a lot easier to extract from my head what I want to say in this book.
I worked earlier this year with a woman editing her book who had a whole bunch of ideas, but they were not in buckets or they were not grouped together. And what I learned to appreciate from that experience was that it was easy for me to look at her material and say, here's a chunk of chapters that all belong together. Did you always know how to order material in your brain, or is this a skill that you learned? Because clearly you're not struggling with the same thing that she struggled with.
I think I've been in business for a long time, and a lot of the businesses I've been in, we were selling through proposals. We did custom proposals, and because we did custom proposal, it needs to be structured in a certain way. So I think once I started to write the book, I took the same approach, and I had learned from doing these proposals that can't really be rambling, that it has to have a structure that sort of makes sense, that sort of eases in the reader into the content, and obviously, like in all expert books, I assume you need to start with the basics, so that they first know the basics, so then you build on that and build up to more and more expertise.
Mm-hmm. How much of the material are you writing from scratch, and how much are you putting in the book that you can repurpose from other sources?
What I'm putting in the book is all original material. Some of it will be repurposed in blog posts and articles and so forth. But what goes in the book is all original stuff.
And where do you see this book housed? Are you planning to self-publish it, or are you planning to approach a publisher?
Probably self-publish. And the reason is simply that in what I've understood is that it takes too long to get an agent and them shopping around your book to several publishers, and a year later you may want to you may be published, or it may take a year to get a contract even. And I know this from I have several acquaintances that have published books, and some have done it the self-published way. Other have done it sort of call it the traditional way, and I want to get this book out. It's taken me a long time to write it, because I also have a business to be engaged with, and I can't sort of take 3 months off and just do the book. So I want to get it off my chest, and I also want to use it, of course, as a way of creating interest in what we do, creating credibility, which I know is one of the key aspects why you do books and why you do articles, why you do blog posts, because you want to be seen as credible. You have to be credible, otherwise people don't want to do business with you.
And writing a book is certainly a hugely successful way of establishing your credibility.
Yep. Absolutely, yeah. It's the and again, I've I've talked to a legion of sort of one man band consultants, if you like, and they say I wrote the book, and people start calling me, you know. So even if they self published, but just having that book makes a big difference.
And you brought up a good point, Per, because there used to be a stigma associated with self-publishing, but that has disappeared. No one
Hmm.
is really paying attention to whether this is the Sjofors publishing company or it's Random House.
Yeah.
It's still, for your business purposes, it's a book that shows your credibility and authority.
Yeah, and obviously people who I mean, having the book is the first step, and obviously there's going to be many who read this book and then really understand the amount of call it the resource and capacity that needs to be, and thoughts that needs to go into making pricing the right way. It's, I mean, going back to what you started off saying, that the just guessing is not, it's very easy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also very costly because you leave tons of money on the table unless of course, and this happens sometimes, you have dumb luck and you just happen to guess the right price. That is very unusual, though.
How are you going to price your book?
I haven't thought of that, actually.
Maybe there's some research there.
Yeah, maybe we've actually done research we've done research on the company. So we have done the same work that we do for our clients on our company, and obviously we found the same thing that we find in almost all our clients, meaning that we were using suboptimal marketing messages, we were using suboptimal customer targeting, we were using suboptimal, we were pushing the suboptimal features and functions of our service, and of course our price was wrong. So now this is all, I mean, this is something we did only about a month ago, and so we have now corrected it. So but
Isn't that fascinating?
it goes to show that no, that the process that we have worked for everybody.
You know that expression that the shoe cobbler's children don't have shoes?
Yep.
We always, we're at risk, I think, always of not applying what we know to our own businesses. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
we get blind to that. And I think it's great that you used that methodical process and said, let me check my own business
Yeah.
and see if I'm pricing it correctly.
People ask me. It's a it's not uncommon for potential clients to ask, how do you, I mean, did you use your own process? Did you eat your own dog food to be more yeah. And now I can say yes. So it's,
yeah, it would be a little hard to say, oh no, we didn't use our own process.
Well, in fact, we actually used we did this like 5 or 6 years ago, but it wasn't, we didn't, we did it sort of with our left hand. It wasn't as thorough as we would typically do it for a client. And now we did it with the same detail and insights as we would for a client. And that made a big difference.
That's great.
So,
one more question before I ask how our listeners can find out more about you. Mm-hmm. You mentioned you can't write full-time. You have a business to run. How are you fitting writing into your daily life or weekly life?
Well, I'm lucky enough to, if you want to say that, to suffer from insomnia. So, between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. it's a really good time to write for me. So,
house is quiet and no distractions.
No distractions, and it it's the time actually. Early in the morning, I figured this out many years ago, but anything before lunch, I can be effective. After lunch, forget it. So when I stretch my day, I have to stretch it in the beginning of the day.
And then when do you go to sleep at night?
I don't sleep very much, but not as much as I would like to sometimes. So.
All right. I know that people listening to this program are going to be curious about your business and the services that you offer. What would be the best way for them to be able to find out more?
So the business is called Atenga Insights, and Atenga is, our website is atenga.com. And Atenga is actually it's a Spanish word used in Latin America, meaning dependable. And so that's why we're using it. And my
Can you
email
spell that out for us, Per?
ATENGA.
Just like it sounds, Atenga.
Yeah. And we have, I'm per@atenga.com, PER@atenga.com. Or you can write it hello@atenga.com, and it comes to me eventually too. So
perfect. Well, I think you've shared with us some great tips on the process that you follow with your writing process, and I'll summarize what I retained. The key thing that I think you talked about was writing your book for your ideal client and not being concerned about giving away too much, because they cannot replicate what you do, but they will get insights as to the value of your services. You shared with us that your research is primarily in the area of helping people price their services correctly so that they're not relying on that infamous crystal ball and pulling numbers out of the air.
Yep.
And that often by not trying to do it yourself, you end up in the long run saving money because you can get into a project and get lost or screw it up, like my husband screwed up the pipe under the sink. You create an outline for your book and then fill in the outline, and the ability to order things in the outline comes from years of your experience in working in this part of writing proposals and knowing what order the information should be put into.
Yep.
And you're doing a lot of writing between the hours of 3 and 6 while the rest of us are snoring, as my husband tells me that I do. But you've got that shift of, certainly if you've been up since 3, anything after lunch is like the evening for you.
Yeah, well, it's just the way it is, So.
And it's key, I think, for everyone to know when they are most productive, when they're most creative.
Yes.
When those ideas start flowing, you need to understand your own energy levels to figure out when is a good time to write and when is a good time to do something less demanding, which might be proofreading or editing what you've written.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Or doing the research to get the content together so that you can write the chapter.
Yep, that's very true.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on our show. And thank you to you who's been listening to this interview with Per Sjofers about the way that he's creating his book. Please stay tuned. Next week, we'll have a new guest, a new podcast, and would love to have you check out our website at patiyer.com.
Thank you very much, Pat, for having me, and I hope I could add some value to your programming and to the audience.
Thank you.